everyone and welcome back. If you're just tuning in, I'm Longman and on this channel I retell medieval Irish stories while mispronouncing all of the names, sometimes deliberately. Today I'm going to be telling you the first part of nUislenn, the Exile of the Sons of Uisliu. It's an Ulster cycle text. It's one of the Revscéile or foretales to the Táin. If you're not familiar with Táin Beculinge, it's the story of the armies of Ireland versus one 17-year-old boy. And he's winning. I would highly recommend reading it. It's a great starting point for medieval Irish literature, not least because there are translations of it that are really good and easy to get hold of. So Kieran Carson's is usually what I recommend as a starting point. Great style, it's where I started, very easily available, or Kinsella's, which is a bit more classic and includes this story at the beginning of it. You can also find this story in Gant's Early Irish Myths and Sagas, so I've put links to all of those in the description if you want to do some reading for yourself. So nUislenn is one of the foretales or prequels. It's one of those stories you need to know in order to properly understand what's going on in the Táin. But that doesn't mean they're written in an organised linear fashion or by the same people, because there's a lot of chronological weirdness going on. For starters, Cuchulainn, the aforementioned 17-year-old boy, is not in nUislenn, though chronologically it makes no sense for it to have taken place before he was born because he overlaps with several of the characters in it. There's a later version of the story, the early modern Irish version, that does include Cuchulainn because the author obviously realised that this didn't work, but I'm going to be telling you the early version today. That's mostly because I know it better. The earliest surviving version is like roughly 12th century, I think. It appears in the Book of Leinster, which is the same place that one version of the Táin appears, and you'd think, given that they're in the same manuscript, there'd be more internal consistency, but no. That's medieval narrative tradition for you. Anyway, it's arguable that nUislenn is one of the most important Revscéile for the Táin because without it there are a lot of things that are quite confusing. So you get this guy in the Táin called Fergus mac Roich. He's from Ulster, he's one of Cuchulainn's foster fathers. He was previously on very good terms with the King of Ulster, who is a guy called Conchobar, or Crucha, or Connor if you want to take a modern Irish pronunciation, but I really don't, so I'm just going to keep calling him Conchobar. Yet despite having previously been, besties with Conchobar, Fergus is now fighting for Medb and Éilil, the Queen and King of Connacht. Connacht are Ulster's enemies in the Táin. Not only that, but a bunch of his allies are fighting for Connacht too, including King of Ulster's son Cormac, but also 7 kings of Munster and a bunch of people from Leinster too. So approximately half of Medb's army is there because they're loyal to Fergus mac Roich. It means that if Fergus mac Roich decides to switch sides, Medb is in a lot of trouble, which makes him one of the most important figures in the Táin, often overlooked fact. And in order to understand how he came to be fighting for Connacht, we need to look back at nUislenn because the Táin itself doesn't tell us that story. So that was kind of a lot of background info. Let's get on with the actual story. It starts, as a lot of these stories do, with a party. The Ulstermen are drinking at the house of Conchobar's storyteller, a guy called Feithlimid, whose name I cannot pronounce, I'm just gonna avoid doing that. Everyone's drinking and yelling and having a good time, and Feithlimid's wife is serving them despite being very heavily pregnant. She does not have a name, for the record, which is a bit tragic. So she is not far off giving birth, but she's still serving the drinks, and all of the drunken Ulstermen are about to head for bed, so Feithlimid's wife decides it's time she went to bed too. So she's just crossing the house on the way to wherever her bed is, and as she's crossing the room they hear this horrendous scream that seems to be coming from her womb. Like the unborn child is screaming. Like it is an ear-splitting, bone-chilling kind of shout, and everyone is very freaked out. They leap to their feet, they're ready to fight. "Hang on a second," says a guy called Synge. "Put your weapons away. Bring the woman here and we'll ask her what the noise is." So they bring her over and Feithlimid asks his wife what that absolutely terrifying sound was. She replies that she doesn't know because no woman is granted that knowledge of her own womb until the child is born, so she suggests they ask Cathbad, who is a druid, because druids know this kind of thing. So they ask Cathbad. He's Conchobar's druid, he's also Cuchulainn's grandfather, which is a fact I always manage to forget somehow. And he says, yep, it was the child who cried out, and that this child will be a beautiful woman. She'll have blonde curls, blue-grey eyes, scarlet-red lips, snow-white teeth. Queens will be jealous of her, champions will fight for her. Her name will be Deirdre, and because of her there will be great evil. Now nobody likes to be told that their unborn child is a bringer of doom and destruction upon her own people, but how Feithlimid's wife responds to this we don't know, because she never appears in the story again. Once Deirdre is born, however, Cathbad refines his prophecy and gives a few more details. And this is not an ambiguous prophecy that could be interpreted in multiple ways. This is detailed, names, info. Because of Deirdre, he says, the Sons of Uisliu will be exiled, one of Conchobar's sons will die, Great Fergus mac Roich is going to go into exile, and a bunch of other people are going to suffer and or die and or be exiled. He emphasises, this is because of Deirdre. Because of her, everything will be terrible. Everybody's immediate conclusion is that they should just kill her now and get it over with. But Conchobar, however, clearly stopped listening after the part where he said that Deirdre would be hot. So he refuses. He says he'll have her taken away and brought up where no one can see her, and when she's old enough, he'll marry her. So I should point out, Conchobar is a grown man. He's the king of Ulster, and this is a literal infant. Because that's not A, intensely creepy, and B, likely to blow up in his face. The dude's not only a creep, he's also an idiot who will ignore a highly specific prophecy of death and destruction because he thinks the focus of it will be beautiful. You know, when she's not a literal baby. Everything Conchobar does in this story is just completely horrifying though, so I don't even know why we're surprised anymore. The Ulstermen probably think that this is extremely sketchy too, but they're too scared of him to argue, so Deirdre is taken away and raised and brought up under instructions from Conchobar until she's the most beautiful girl that Ireland has ever seen. None of the Ulstermen are allowed to see her, which means the only people who are allowed in the house where she's being raised are her foster parents and a woman called Leborcham. And Conchobar would rather not let Leborcham in, but she's a poet, so he can't stop her. Because poets, especially satirists like Leborcham, have a lot of power in medieval Ireland. They can bring shame on kings, and shame is basically the worst thing that can happen to anybody in medieval Irish literature. It can result in losing your kingship. It's a really, really big deal. So Leborcham can basically do what she wants. You need to keep on the good side of a poet. One day, Deirdre's looking out at the charming sight of her foster father skinning a cow for them to have for dinner, and she sees a raven alight on the snow and start drinking the blood. She turns to Leborcham and goes, "You know what I like in a man? For him to remind me of this." Because apparently being raised in isolation with only a poet for company makes you super morbid and weird. A man with hair as black as a raven, cheeks as red as blood, and skin as white as snow. And Leborcham says, well then it's your lucky day, because I know a man just like that, and he's not very far away. His name is nUislenn mac Uisliu. I have to see him, says Deirdre. I'll never be happy again unless I see him. Let's digress a moment here to talk about nUislenn, or nUislenn if you want to take the medieval approach to his name. nUislenn has two brothers, and the three of them are fantastic singers. When they sing, cows give more milk, and people become more peaceful. He's not just a musician though. The three brothers are fighters too, and they're good fighters. They could fight all of the Ulstermen together, and as long as they have each other, they would win. They're swift and skilled at hunting. In other words, nUislenn is a catch. He's also Conchobar's nephew, and according to two other stories, he trained with the warrior woman Scothach alongside Cuchulainn. This is an often overlooked fact, probably because the only story where nUislenn appears as a main character is this one, and it's not mentioned here. But that's one of the reasons the timeline placing this story before Cuchulainn is born doesn't really work. The other reason is Fergus. And I feel like we've been deprived of nUislenn and Cuchulainn's youthful adventures together, which is pretty tragic. The stories in question are the wooing of Eather and the training of Cuchulainn, which both give separate and slightly contradictory lists of the warriors who trained with Cuchulainn. Both mention Ferdia, who comes up in the Toyn and is about the most legit one to include, but the only other person to appear on both lists is nUislenn. So anyway, whether or not he trained with Scothach, he's a pretty great fighter, and so are his two brothers. He's also hot, if you like them vaguely vampiric and prone to blushing, and he's a lot closer to Deirdre in age than the Creepmeister Supreme Conchobar. Now one day nUislenn is out singing, like the Disney princess that he is, and Deirdre sneaks out of her house, walking past him in a highly unsuspicious fashion. Whoa, says nUislenn, who doesn't recognise her on account of the fact that she's been kept locked up for like her entire life. Nice. Because, you know, he's a Disney princess, but he's not above a bit of objectification now and again. They engage in some highly agricultural and unsubtle metaphors about cows, at which point it turns out that nUislenn does realise who she is, or has figured it out, because he says, "You have the bull of the province." That is, Conchobar, king of the Ulstermen. "Listen, mate," says Deirdre, "you really think I'd choose Conchobar over you? You're young, you're hot, let's run away together." "No way," he says. "This is what Cathbad said would happen, and I'm pretty sure he mentioned me by name on the list of people who are gonna get exiled or otherwise suffer. That doesn't sound like a great time. I will be honest with you. Are you rejecting me?" says Deirdre. "Obviously," says nUislenn, "because I'm not an idiot. Have you met Conchobar? We would never get away with it." Deirdre does the only logical thing. She grabs him by the ears. Yeah, I don't know either. "I will shame you in front of everyone if you don't," she says. "Shame, shame, shame. It will follow you for the rest of your life." Damn it, says nUislenn, because he's the only genre-savvy person in this entire story, so he knows at this point that he's screwed. "I'll say it again," says Deirdre. "You're young, you're hot, let's run away together." And this time, he agrees. But they need a bit of a distraction if they're going to sneak away, so Naoise starts singing again. This time though, it's not a peaceful song that makes cows give milk or people chill the hell out, unfortunately, because I feel like that would actually be helpful. This time it sets all the Ulstersmen fighting each other. And you know that scene in Shrek or Shrek 2 where the princesses are like singing sweetly and then the scream from Immigrant Song by Led Zeppelin comes on and then they storm the castle? That is exactly what I'm envisaging here. So I hope you know that. So Naoise's brothers hear this and conclude that Naoise must be doing something illegal again, so they go to stop him and find that he and Deirdre are packing. "What are you doing? Please tell me this is not what it looks like," they say to him. "You cannot run off with Deirdre, and why did you have to make everyone kill each other? There are better ways of causing a distraction. We could have just stripped." He explains that Deirdre threatened him with shame, and they back off a bit. They can't blame him. Shame is bad. Like, really, really bad. Like, worse than death. Bad. And they're not gonna let that happen to their brother. "Okay, fine, but we're coming with you," they tell him. "There isn't a king in Ireland who will refuse us." Firstly, because as soon as they hear about this, they'll know that Conchobar is in the wrong, and secondly, we're young and hot and they love us. So the three brothers gather their warriors, their servants, their dogs, and with Deirdre hiding in amongst the crowds, they leave. But to know how Conchobar reacts when he discovers this, or whether Cathbad's prophecy turns out to be as bad as it sounds, you'll have to wait for part 2. I hope you've enjoyed this instalment of Longman nUislenn. Don't forget to subscribe to be the first to know when I make new videos, and you can also find me on other social media. Updated links in the description, given that I've changed my username pretty much everywhere. If you've learned something from this video, please consider dropping a tip in my coffee jar and supporting my ongoing research. It's linked in the description, as are a handful of recommended books. See you next time!